He was a brave and courageous soldier who had seen the horrors of war firsthand. He missed the sense of purpose and camaraderie that he had in the military, and he struggled with the transition to civilian society. Frank's difficulty adjusting to civilian life was compounded by the fact that he didn't have any prior experience with managing finances. He found himself struggling to make ends meet and was constantly worried about money. As time went on, Frank became increasingly isolated and lonely. He struggled to connect with others and found himself turning to alcohol as a way to cope with his feelings of isolation and stress. This only made matters worse, and Frank found himself spiraling out of control. Eventually, Frank lost his housing, which he had waited 6 years to get. He was now homeless and living on the streets, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a few coins that he managed to beg for each day. Frank felt like he had hit rock bottom and didn't know how to get back on his feet. Frank meandered through the well-known streets of his hometown, his thoughts stuck in a loop, replaying a particular day from his past. It was a day he lost a comrade during a special operation, and he couldn't shake the memory. His mind was like a hamster wheel, always spinning until he turned to alcohol to escape the pain. As he strolled by a row of shops, his attention was drawn to a hair salon, its bright sign a beacon against the gray backdrop of the street. Frank caught his own reflection in the window, and he stopped in his tracks, momentarily stunned by what he saw. The man staring back at him was a far cry from the soldier he once was. His hair was overgrown and unkempt, and his beard had grown to a length that obscured his features. Frank felt a pang of shame, realizing how far he had fallen. He had become one of the many homeless veterans who roamed the streets, forgotten by society and left to fend for himself. As he continued to stare at his reflection, Frank felt a sense of determination wash over him. He knew he needed to make a change, to reclaim his dignity and start anew, but the path ahead was uncertain, and he wondered if he had the strength to face it. With a few begged coins clutched tightly in his hand, Frank hesitated outside the hair salon, uncertain if he had enough. Summoning the courage to enter, he was met with disdainful looks from the staff, one of whom even wrinkled her nose and commented on his odor. Frank felt embarrassed and ashamed as he tried to explain the situation. I'm sorry. I know I don't smell great, but do you think you could give me a quick buzz cut? He said softly. Olivia rolled her eyes and shook her head. Sorry, buddy, we're not a charity here. You should try looking for cans in the trash instead, she said, pointing to a nearby bin. Feeling embarrassed and dejected, Frank turned to leave the salon. As he was about to walk out the door, he heard one of the girls snicker and whisper something to her colleague. What a loser, the girl said loud enough for Frank to hear. I can't believe he even thought we would let him in here looking like that. The other girls laughed along with her, making Frank feel even more ashamed. Frank took a deep breath and tried to hold back his tears as he walked away from the salon. He couldn't help but feel like he didn't belong in this world anymore. He had given his all to his country, and this was how he was treated. It was a harsh reality that he had to face every day. Frank went out without saying anything back because he saw no point in reacting to something he was already used to. When he was outside, a young girl walked towards the salon. Rachel took one look at Frank and said, "Nice hairstyle, sir." She thought he had already gotten a haircut. "Thanks, but I don't really like it." Frank laughed and walked past her. Rachel was confused. "Sir, you just came out of our salon. Would you like to get your hair redone?" Frank stopped and looked at her with a smile on his face for a while. "Thank you, sweetheart. Your friends didn't have time for me," Frank said, trying not to blame them. Rachel thought it was strange because there were 2 available hairstylists. "Sir, come on in. I'll fix your hair," Rachel offered. Frank sighed and felt like he was forced to tell her what really happened. "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, sir. I just got to work. Let me give you a nice one to make it up. I'm full of energy right now." Rachel smiled. "I'm sorry, honey, but I can't even pay you. I only got a quarter and a dime. Do you think you could just give me a buzz cut?" "Sure, sir. Come on in. I can give you a buzz cut if you want to, but I think I can give you something else that you will really like." Rachel smiled and asked Frank to come in, holding the door. Rachel and Frank walked into the salon. Olivia couldn't help but notice them and let out a slight groan. "Oh, here we go again," she thought to herself. Rachel, oblivious to Olivia's reaction, walked over to the receptionist and greeted her with a smile. "Hey Tina, can you please call the lady that had an appointment for 10 and ask if she can come later? Like say 11:20? She asked cheerfully. Why? What happened? Tina asked. Oh, I've got a client here. Rachel looked at Frank. Tina looked Frank up and down. We kicked this guy out just before you came in. What did he tell you to get you to do his hair? Tina asked. Hey, Tina, take it easy, alright? Jesus, Rachel replied, taking off her jacket. Rachel, you sound like you know this bum. Why do you even care? Or is he your father? Tina asked and laughed. Rachel looked up at her, her anger building up. But then she remembered that she needed to control her emotions and not go down on her level. She sighed and said, Sure. What if he is my father? What then? Frank stood there not knowing what to do. He didn't want to cause any trouble or get them to call the police. He just wanted to leave at that moment. Olivia walked out from another room. She saw Frank standing there and sighed. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you to stay away from here? Rachel turned to Olivia, a bit surprised. Oh, hi, Olivia. How are you? She asked, trying to make small talk. Olivia put on a fake smile. I'm fine, thanks, she replied before turning back to her magazine. Rachel, sensing the tension in the air, decided to just ignore Olivia and focused on her client. The girls continued to make unpleasant comments and Rachel tried to reason with them, but it only made the situation worse. Frank could see how upset Rachel was getting and apologized for causing trouble. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I'm just gonna take off. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. Thank you so much. Frank got up and began to leave. No, sir, you have done nothing wrong. These girls need to learn some manners and not judge people based on their appearance. Rachel was shouting at girls. You guys are pathetic. I can't believe I've been working with you. Rachel was furious. She grabbed her jacket and left, slamming the door. Rachel, sweetheart, I'm so sorry about what happened. Frank was apologetic. It's been just 2 weeks, sir. It's not a big deal. I will manage. And I'm still gonna make sure you get a haircut, alright? Rachel was determined. They left the salon and Rachel offered to go to her place where she could give him a nice haircut. After Rachel was done cutting Frank's hair, she suggested, You can take a shower and relax a bit. Frank hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, feeling grateful for Rachel's kindness. As he took a warm shower, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the feeling of being clean again after such a long time. Wow, this feels amazing, he thought to himself. When he stepped out of the shower, Frank was surprised at how much better he looked with a new haircut and trimmed beard. He stood in front of the mirror for a while, admiring his reflection and feeling a newfound sense of confidence. But as he continued to look at himself, he suddenly felt a wave of sadness wash over him. This is how I used to look before I became homeless, he thought, his eyes welling up with tears. Rachel noticed Frank's sudden change in demeanor and approached him with concern. Hey, are you okay? She asked softly, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Frank wiped away his tears and managed a small smile. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just, I never realized how much I had lost until now, he said, his voice breaking a little. Rachel nodded understandingly. I get it, but remember, this is just the beginning. You can get back on your feet and have a better life again, she said, giving him a supportive hug. Frank felt a glimmer of hope in his heart, grateful for Rachel's words of encouragement. Thank you, feeling a renewed sense of determination to turn his life around. As they sat together sipping coffee, Frank told Rachel his story and how he ended up on the streets. Rachel was moved by Frank's story and realized how many people like him could be struggling on the streets. Rachel pondered how she could use her time productively now. After all, she wasn't going back to the salon. She wasn't that good yet, and therefore still on probation. She looked at Frank, and it dawned on her. Mr. Nash, do you know a lot of people that are homeless? Rachel asked suddenly. Yeah, I know a few, Frank replied. Rachel had an idea to practice her hairstyling skills by giving haircuts to homeless people for free. As she considered this, she thought it might be helpful to have some company and turned to Frank. Mr. Nash, she said, I know this is a bit unconventional, but would you like to join me in going around and offering haircuts to those in need? Frank, with plenty of time on his hands, readily agreed. Rachel and Frank approached their first customer for their new initiative, a homeless man named Mark, who happened to be a longtime friend of Frank's. As they made their way over to him, Mark was caught off guard and surprised to see Rachel with Frank, but he didn't initially recognize Frank due to his neat attire. It wasn't often that someone dressed so nicely would even acknowledge him, let alone strike up a conversation. Hey Mark, how's it going? Frank greeted him warmly. Mark was taken aback. "Frank, is that really you?" Frank laughed. "Yeah, man, it's me. Listen, Rachel and I are starting a new project, and we thought you might be interested." Mark looked